Okay, so we're going to do today Daf Chaf Amud Aleph, Pesachim Daf Chaf Amud Aleph. We're not speaking about a case that we spoke about yesterday and the day before. That if in the Beis Hamikdash, there's a kohen was shechting the carbon, and they found the tam the needle touching the meat. So we said that the hands of the kohen are not tameh, and the hands and the knife that was cutting the meat isn't tameh, but the meat itself is tameh. Says the Gemara, it's Daf Chaf Amud Aleph, all the way at the top. V'abasar tameh. It's on the second line. It says the Gemara, Rabasar Tameh. The Gemara is quoting from the case, and then the fact was that the meat is tameh. Why is the meat tameh? The meat is tameh because it touched the tameh needle. Says the Gemara, Hi Basar Diskasha B'mai. This meat that became tameh, how is it muksher? Yeah, because we already explained a few times. In order for something to become tameh, it has to have some sort of setting aside. It has to have some sort of hachana. Has to have some sort of preparation for it to become tummy. So in most cases, the preparation is if it has liquid. If that was liquid poured over intentionally on this item, then it's able to be makabel tumah. So this meat that was in the Beis Hamikdash, which liquid? Yeah, when was it ever wet in order for it to become tummy? How can we say stamazeh? Since the meat touched the needle, it's tummy. How was the meat wet? So, name the discussion with them. If you're going to tell me, very simple. What do you mean? Those blood, the meat's coming from after it got shechted. So there's blood. So blood touched the meat. But since the blood touched the meat, so therefore the meat is very able to become tameh. So you can't say that. How do we know that the blood of a korban isn't counted as liquid to be machshir something? Meaning the blood of a korban cannot make something wet, as opposed to make something wet for the rules of tumah. Why not? It says in pasuk, it says regarding the blood of the blood of karbanis. The blood of animals. That regular blood you shouldn't eat. It should flow like water. So when you have your normal carbon, so what to do with the blood? You throw it out. So the Gemara learns that already learns before dam nishbach kamayim. If you have blood which is like water, meaning that you just throw it out and it flows regularly, so that could make something be machshir. But blood which is not thrown on the floor, blood which is thrown in the mizbeach, so it's a different type of liquid because has a different status of halacha, and therefore the blood in Beis Hamikdash was not able to matame, was not able to machshir things to become tameh. So back to our question: how did this piece of meat become tameh, even if it touched tameh like a needle? But at the end of the day, the piece of meat wasn't wet with any liquid. Since the piece of meat wasn't wet with any liquid, how can it become tameh? Are you going to tell me it became wet with blood? The blood of Beis Hamikdash isn't machshir. The Elo has another answer. I was going to say this kasha b'mashke base mit b'chayil, that the meat somehow became wet with other liquids. Yeah, the Beis Hamikdash had to soak after they shechted the carbon. They take the meat and they have to soak it, and they have to rinse it, and they have to clean it out. So that's how it became wet. And since that's how it becomes wet, since that's how the meat became wet, therefore it's able to become tummy. Says the Gemara, Beis V'chanina says, Mashke bitten b'chayo, loy dayan shein dochon elo shein machshirin. Beis V'chanina says in Beis Hamikdash was a exception to the rule that the liquid in Beis Hamikdash wasn't able to be machshir something, wasn't able to make something be prepared to become tumah. So even if the elo shein, not only that the liquid is tar, but the liquid cannot be machshir, the liquid cannot make something become tumah. So even if the meat became wet through the washing down of the karbanos inside Beis Hamikdash, but it's still not. How was it able to become tameh if we have a rule that the liquid inside Beis Hamikdash isn't able to make things ready to become tameh? So now there's an answer, a final answer. It's a very interesting answer. The answer is the answer is that the meat in Beis Hamikdash doesn't need a preparation, doesn't need to be wet in order to become tameh. Why? Because the meat in Beis Hamikdash, since it's very special meat, meaning it's meat which is holy of a carbon, so it's already designated to the side, it's already different, and therefore it doesn't need to be prepared to become tameh. Okay. Make a recap. The rule is that if you have, in order for something to become tameh, it has to have some sort of preparation to become tameh. So let's say you have an apple. The apple would have had to have the preparation If a dead person touched the apple doesn't become tummy. If the apple was wet, meaning the apple had a preparation to become tummy, then the apple could become tummy. Says the Gemara that in the Beis Hamikdash, you don't need a preparation to become tummy, because since the things in Beis Hamikdash are so special, and everyone thinks about them, and they're chashuv, so they don't need a preparation to become tummy. They can become tummy even without preparation. Says the Gemara, when do we say this idea that Beis Hamikdash is special? So l'cheira, that's only regarding to say that if a Talmudic person touched it, it'll be usher to eat it. But so when mechadeshim more, you're telling me that what? That not only is, since the meat is special, it doesn't need a preparation to become puzzle, but according to the answer we're answering over here, the meat doesn't even need preparation to become tummy, and then they keep even become something else. So if so, tifsheit the boy Rish Lakish. So like according to this, we have an answer. If this actually is the true fact, if the true fact is that the meat in this English does not need liquid to become tummy, so we have an answer to the question Rish Lakish asked. What did Rish Lakish ask? Rish Lakish asked like this: if you have flour, dry flour from the carbon mincha, from Beis Hamikdash, that oil never touched it. So you have dry flour that was never wet. If a dead person touches this flour, would it become tamei? Or would it not become tamei because it wasn't wet? So if Rish Lakish asked such a question, why can Rish Lakish answer very clearly? That since it's Beis Hamikdash, it doesn't need to become wet. So it must be that we don't say this rule regarding tum. In Beis Hamikdash, since things are holy and since things are designated, if a Talmudic person touches a piece of meat, even though it wasn't wet, but since it's holy, the piece of meat now becomes puzzle. But it doesn't have a care to become tummy. It doesn't become tummy. Tum only works if you have liquid in it. And that's what Rish Lakish was asking: if you have the flour in Beis Hamikdash, does it become tummy or does it not become tummy? If that which becomes puzzle, if a Talmudic person touches, everyone agrees. The question is if it becomes tummy. And Rish Lakish never found his answer. So it must mean that even in Beis Hamikdash, you need liquid to go on the object for it to become tummy. So if so, back to square one, how did this meat become tummy through touching the needle if it was never wet? So the Gemara finishes the last answer. The Gemara says, Amar Yehuda Mishmuel, the para was the cow was a behema that was brought by Ve'vira banar, and on the way to the Beis Hamikdash, he went through a river. So the cow, his whole skin was wet anyway. And by the time they came to Beis Hamikdash, it was still soaking wet from the river he went through. And the Kohen shechted it. And since the Kohen shechted it, so for sure some water from the skin went into the neck, went into the meat, and that's how the meat became wet. Okay, so that was the case of how the meat became wet. The final answer is it becomes wet because how the meat was kavatuma. The final answer is meat was kavatuma because the cow went through a river before it was shechted, and after it was shechted, the liquid went inside the behema, made it wet. Okay. Part of the story we mentioned yesterday was, again, we're dealing with the story here that a Kohen shechted a behema and he found a Talmudic needle in the animal. So we had two things. We said we had two cases. If the needle was inside the meat, so the meat is tummy. But then we added if the needle was inside the dirt, meaning dirt inside the animal stomach, it wasn't actually touching the meat. It was, let's say there's a whole bunch of dirt in the animal stomach and the needle was there. So then it's toy. Not counted as touching meat, and then for the animal's turn. Says the Gemara in we're quoting from the case that if you find that needle in the dirt of the animal's stomach, it's tired. Says the Gemara, why is it tired? If the needle's touching the dirt, so the dirt should become tummy. And if the dirt becomes tummy, so it should make the cow tummy, right? Because if the dirt is in the cow's stomach and the needle touched the dirt, so the dirt is now becomes tummy. Once the dirt becomes tummy, it's able to make the cow tummy. So why do we say that if you find the needle in the dirt, everything's fine? Answers the Gemara, we're speaking about a dirt which is very dry and thick. And therefore, since the dirt is very dry and thick, there's no liquid. There's no liquid on the dirt. And since there's no liquid on the dirt, meaning already turned into rubbish, and the thing is that it's not makabel tuma. Dirt is not makabel tuma. That's one answer. Another answer is Ravashi Amar Afilu Tembo Perish. You can even tell me with soft dirt. We shouldn't have it. And the reason why soft dirt is not makabel tuma because the liquid because the dirt is something which is disgusting. I mean, it's not even if it's still liquidy, but it's something which is doesn't it's not one of the seven. It's not one of the liquids that are able to make things tumble because it's a disgusting liquid. And since it's a disgusting liquid, even if the dirt was wet, meaning would be able to become tummy, but since it's a disgusting liquid, we do not count it as liquid to make it tummy. Okay, so now the Gemara finished that case of the needle touching the garment. The Gemara goes back to the general rules of tum. Says the Gemara, Tani Tana Kamed Rav Sheshes. Someone learned in the name of Rav Sheshes, in front of Rav Sheshes. I mean, someone was learning in front of Rav Sheshes, and he said like this. You see, he quoted the Brisa. The Brisa says like this: Sheretz Matame Esamashkin. He said that this person was Masada, the say how things become tummy. He said, Sharetz, Matame Samashkin, a rodent could be Matame liquid. Once the liquid is Tame, Umashkin, Matame Sakli. The liquid is Matame a vessel. Once the vessel is Tame, this vessel can now, or Kli Matame Saechel, this vessel can now go with Matame food. And once the food is Tame Vaechel, Matame Samashkin, and food can now be Matame the liquid. Okay, so it's like a circle. The Brice's case is that the rodent touched liquid, the liquid touched the vessel touched food, and then the food went back to a liquid and made it tummy. So we have 4 levels of it. And the person who was learning from Rav Sheshes finished off. From here we see 3 levels of tuma, 3 degree tuma by a rodent. Says the Gemara, the obvious question: which 3 degree tuma? We just said there's 4 levels. There's 4 levels. Why? Because we said that the rodent touched the liquid touched the vessel touched the food, and the food touched another liquid. That's 4 levels of tumah. Why did he say that we can see a scenario of only 3 liquids, of only 3 levels of tumah? Says the Gemara, Guf mashkin the reisha, Guf mashkin the reisha. Gemara says take away minus the first time we mentioned liquid, meaning the case of the Brisa wasn't that the rodent touched. Wasn't the case of the Brisa wasn't that the rodent touched liquid and the liquid touched the vessel. The case of the Brisa was the rodent touched a vessel touched food, and food touched liquid. So there's only 3 degrees over here. Why we say that? Because that goes according to the Rabbi Akiva, which you know before, that Rabbi Akiva says that a liquid can become a 3rd degree tum. Says the Gemara, Adrab goes mashkin the sefer. Instead of minusing saying the case was that the rodent touched the vessel, and the vessel touched food, and food touched the liquid. Say the other way around. Say that the rodent touched liquid, and liquid touched the vessel, and the vessel touched food. Meaning, why are you minusing? Why are you saying the case was that the rodent that you're minusing the first time you mentioned liquid in the case, minus the second time the liquid mentioned in the case? What is that? What do we gain? Because then the Brisa go according to Rabbi Yehuda, that Rabbi Yehuda says that mashkin, that liquid, can become a vessel. So if Yehuda says that liquid can become a vessel, this is a clear proof for Rabbi Yehuda, because the case is that the rodent touched the liquid, and the liquid is become a vessel. So to prove Rabbi Yehuda. So the only time we find that says that liquid can become a vessel is Rabbi Yehuda. And Rabbi Yehuda himself went back on his reasoning, and Rabbi Yehuda himself changed his mind and said that liquid could not be matama vessels. If liquid could not be matama vessels, the only way to touch the brisa is that we have to say that the rodent touched vessels, and the vessel touched liquid, and the vessel touched food, and the food touched the liquid. The simon for the seder, the simon for this that we just said that what the case of the rice is the rodent touched a vessel, and the vessel touched food, and food touched liquid, is from people who make beer. Why? Because people make beer. First, they bring a vessel, which is the simon for the rodent touching the vessel. Then they put inside the vessel, they put food, they put barley, which is food, and then they put liquid. So we see this the Gemara saying a sign to remember the order of the brisa is that first you have the vessel, meaning the rodent touched the vessel. Then you have inside the vessel you put food, which means the vessel touched food, and then you have the third level, the food touched the liquid and makes it tough. Okay. Says the Gemara this. Tan Hasim, we learn in the Mishnah, Shadas and Nimsa Batano, if you have a rodent that's found inside the oven, and there's bread inside the oven, but the rodent didn't actually touch the oven, he just was sitting in the oven. So the Mishnah says that if there's any bread in the oven at that time the rodent is there, it becomes a second degree tumah. Why is it a second degree tumah? Because the tanur, the oven becomes the first degree tumah. What does that mean? It means that the rodent, by going into the oven, made the oven first degree tumah, and now that the oven is first degree tumah, it is matama the piece of bread to make a second degree tumah, because the piece of bread is touching the oven. The rodent is also touching the oven. So the rodent's here, the oven's here, and the oven is first degree tumah. It's matama the piece of bread making second degree tumah. Says the Gemara, Amr Rabbi but Rav. Rabbi said to Rabbi, "V'nichzi l'haytano command the moli tumudami, but Tana have it pass shena." Why do we say the piece of bread is only second degree tumah? Why do we look at the oven as one entity? And if you look at the oven as one entity, under the same roof of the oven is a rodent, and under the same roof of the oven is a piece of bread. So why do we say that the oven is one entity, and just like the oven is the first degree tumah, so the piece of bread is the first degree tumah? Because they're all on the same roof, on the same air. So Rabbi answered, he told him, don't say like that. Because the Tanya we learned in the Brisa, you might have think that if you have a vessel like an oven that has a rodent inside, the whole air of the oven becomes something. The whole oven becomes as one entity. That's why I have a pasuk to say, everything inside the oven becomes tummy. The samichle, and the next pasuk is mikol eichel. For any food that the next pasuk is regarding food. So Rabbi learns that eichel matame me'avik yicheres, ve'in kol hakenu matame me'avik yicheres. Food becomes tummy from the air of a earthenware vessel, but vessels don't become tummy from the air of earthenware vessel. Meaning that food can become tummy from touching the oven, but it doesn't make that which is a rodent inside the oven doesn't make the oven as one entity to make it tummy. We're going to expand on this on Sunday in Pesachim. Stop over here.